Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 20th, 2021 Beverly School Committee's Finance and Facilities Subcommittee meeting. We are in a hybrid setup today using a remote meeting application provided at no cost to our district with BevCam broadcasting and recording this meeting as allowed under the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of the Open Meeting Law, MGL 30A, Section 20. Kim, should I record on my computer as a backup? Okay. I'm also recording, as soon as I hit the record button, locally on my computer as a backup. This provision, the governor's provision says, this order suspends a need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks our body to use technical methods to allow public to access. We should be streaming on BevCam's YouTube channel and being broadcast on channel 99. I just said I'm also recording as a backup in case there's any interruption. Joining us today are members of the school committee, some invited guests for our agenda topics, and various members of the district administration and leadership teams. I will conduct a full roll call and attendance in a moment. Through the use of remote meeting technology with BevCam's help, we are attempting to provide public access, which sometimes includes public participation. However, tonight's meeting does not include any public participation. If you are attending this evening remotely, I will endeavor to watch for your hand to be raised to call on you to speak. You can use the hand raise button in the Zoom platform or put your own hand in front of your video camera. Should you be remote and your bandwidth starts to falter, please disable your video in order to recover the audio. I ask that we please not use the chat function unless it relates to a technical issue only, such as loss of sound. And I will ask that, I'll also ask that you please endeavor to speak clearly into your microphone so that we can have an adequate record of our conversations. Remember that any audio and video you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record. As such, I encourage you to use the mute functionality to prevent background noises. And when you are recognized to speak, you can then unmute. All right, we're going to do a roll call. And when I call your name, please confirm you are able to both hear me and that we can hear you. And we'll use this roll call to capture our attendance for our meeting records. All right, in the room on the school committee, we have Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. We have Ms. Coelho.
Here.
Thank you. I'm going to continue. Okay, I'm going to continue in the room. We have Dr. Chirocek.
Yes, hello.
We have Bethany Spolansky.
Yes, hello.
Easy for me to say. We have Jean Sherburne.
Here.
Remotely dialed in, we have a committee member, Mr. Manzo.
Here.
Thank you. We have City Councilor at Large, Julie Flowers.
Hello. Here.
Fantastic, thank you. And we also have our stenographer, Jenna.
Here.
Fantastic, thank you. Not in attendance this evening and on the committee are Lindsay Ducharme and Mr. Silva, Jeffrey Silva. I don't see them in the waiting room, but I'll keep my eye on the waiting room in case they decide to join a little later. Also not in attendance, but sometimes here with us is Councilor Todd Rotundo. He has a conflict this evening, so we were just very happy to have one city councilor with us. Okay, the first order is always on our agenda is to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting. I would love to entertain a motion to do that.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. A motion by Mrs. Robinson, a second by Mr. Manzo. That opens it up for comments, discussions, corrections, if there are any.
Yeah, I saw a correction which says Ms. Keefe and it should say Mr.
Okay, Jenna, there's one instance that I did not catch last night where it says Ms. M.S. instead of Mr. Keefe. Do you have an
Okay,
approximate?
I can go ahead and change that.
Yeah, I see it on page 3.
Okay, fantastic. Mr. Manzo?
I've got just two really small things. One, Jeff Silva's included in with the city council representatives and not with us wonderful citizen representatives under members present. And that's on page 1.
What is he saying?
He
And
said
then
that
the other
Mr.
thing I noticed, and this is even more trivial than that, on page 3, we're talking about revenues, and it was referred to as the string band. And the string band is a thing, but it's not what we have. We have elementary string and band.
You can't. All right, hold on one second. You don't
This is,
understand, Gene?
Now, what was he saying?
Page 3, he's
Yep.
saying that when it talks about elementary band,
Yep,
that it says string band as one word, and it's actually, we have elementary string and band.
okay. Yep, so is Jenna going to be able to correct those, or do you want me to correct them?
We
I
can,
can do them. It doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
and the first one was that Mr. Silva is listed as a city councilor as opposed to a member of the public, a public rep on our committee.
Okay, sounds good. I will
Fantastic.
switch those after this meeting.
I see one more.
Oh, one more. Go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
At the top of, this isn't showing page numbers, but it says Beverly School Food Service. That shouldn't be one word, should it? Food service?
Food service, I think, is one word.
Oh. Never mind.
It's one of those, I think it can be either or.
So we picked the or.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table. We will, because we have a remote participant this evening, we will do our votes. We'll do a roll call vote for each vote. Mr. Manzo, I'll give you the honor of going first this evening.
Aye.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm not muted.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
and myself, yes. That motion passes 4-0 with our other two voting members being absent this evening. And I'll just say that although we greatly appreciate Ms. Flowers' attendance, she doesn't get a vote. Sorry. I feel a little bad about that. Okay, our next item on the agenda, actually, let me share the agenda so everybody can see while I still try to watch and see if anybody's coming into the waiting room. Our next item on our agenda is the Building and Ground Report, our monthly report from Mr. Collins, our Commissioner of Public Services. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that report? All right, we do not vote to accept that report. That report's given to us. And if we have questions on it, we can send them to Jean and she will relay them to Mr. Collins, should anybody have any questions moving forward. Our next item on our agenda is, actually, let me pause here for a second and say that I wish to really call out and thank everybody for being here today. Today was an incredible, historic day. I know I had a really hard time. Hopefully the boss never watches this videotape doing any real work because of what happened today in the inauguration. And there's more inauguration programming this evening, including two of my favorite musical artists. So I'm going to try to rush us through this meeting so we can get home to see my boyfriends. And so our next item is a special education update from Miss Bethany Splansky. Whose name is maybe spelled wrong on the agenda.
It was. I apologize,
Oops,
Bethany.
sorry.
I
I
forgot
didn't
the
catch
sky.
that either. So let me
I fixed it on mine.
remember which one of these reports. Can you look, Bethany, can you see my screen that far? What's your thing called?
It said special education.
Revenue report,
Nope.
report to the Public Schools Division, grants, gifts to schools, budget calendar, F&F, January 2021.
Yeah.
Whew, here we go. All
Here
right,
we go.
so. You get like a slide and a half at a time.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I always enjoy coming and speaking to this group. So for our agenda tonight, I'm going to review some special education data. I'm going to discuss some changes within our department, some of the impacts of COVID-19, and then a review of our tiered focused monitoring. So first is an overview of our October 1 data, and this shows our in-district enrollment. At the time of our October 1 data, we had 874 students who were in district. We had 71 students who were out of district, and we had 30 students who are itinerants, which means that they attend another school, private school setting, but come to us for services only. So that keeps our eligibility rate right between 20 and 21%, which has been pretty consistent over the past couple of years. So our out-of-district enrollment has continued to decrease. This shows you a historical perspective over the last few years of our enrollment. And again, at the time of our October 1 reporting, we had 71 students who were in out-of-district placements. In addition to that, we had 2 students who were at recovery high, 3 students who were placed in other public school settings, and then we also had 3 students who were tuitioned into our district from other school districts. Our new out-of-district placements and move-ins have also remained low. So you can see on this chart, the light blue is new placements that were made, and then the dark blue are students who moved into Beverly who were already in out-of-district placements. And so the move-ins are very variable. We can't predict year to year how that will look, but this year we've had 3 move-ins to date who are already in out-of-district placements, and we've had 2 new placements. So those have been continued to remain low over the past few years. While our enrollments are down, our out-of-district costs remain relatively consistent. And the reason for this is that the placements that have been reduced are generally the lower cost placements, students who are in collaborative placements, and the lower cost kinds of placements. We also have continued fiscal responsibility in some cases, meaning that a student might move to another district, but we may still have the responsibility to fund their placement. We have increased tuition rates, which go up approximately 3% per year. And then we also have reconstruction costs of out-of-district programs. Last year when I came to FNF, we talked a lot about reconstruction costs. Last year we had about $228,000 in reconstruction costs, which means that programs went through major changes to their programming, and as a result, their tuition changed dramatically. And so those are recurring costs once we incur them. So our circuit breaker reimbursement has remained pretty constant. And just as a review, circuit breaker is a state special education reimbursement program that provides additional state funding for high-cost special education students. So you can think of circuit breaker sort of like a mail-in rebate. You spend the money up front, and then a certain percentage over a certain threshold gets reimbursed the following year. So the important thing to remember about circuit breaker is that our reimbursement is based on per student cost, not overall cost. So even though the number of students have gone down over the years, our circuit breaker reimbursement remains pretty steady. And so I'm going to give a specific example that looks at the math behind this. So on the left, we have an example where we have 4 students who are in lower cost placements. So in this example, we're going to assume that the tuition costs $50,000 per student. Foundation is the threshold over which a certain percentage is reimbursed through circuit breaker. So last year's threshold was $45,793. We don't have the threshold yet for this year. So if you take $50,000 and you subtract $45,793, you get just over $4,000. If you take 70% of that, you get just under $3,000. And if you multiply that by 4, because we're saying that we've got 4 students in those placements, you end up with just under $12,000, which would be the reimbursement that we would get through circuit breaker. So in that situation, we have spent $200,000 and we're getting reimbursed $12,000. The example on the right is one student who's in a higher cost placement. So in this example, the tuition cost is $200,000. So we're spending the same amount that we spent on the left. We're again subtracting the foundation amount of $45,793 for just over $150,000. If we multiply that by 70%, we get just under $108,000. We only have 1 student in a placement. And so that ends up being the amount of reimbursement that we get in that situation. So you can see how even though we have fewer students who are in out-of-district placements, because those are the lower cost students, they also don't impact our circuit breaker reimbursement as much.
Okay, Ms. Spolansky, I should have asked you, do you prefer that the committee hold their questions until the end, or would you like them on while you're on a particular slide?
You are welcome to ask questions at any time.
All right, so committee members in the room, you can maybe, if I'm like looking at the screen, you can, or something. And Mr. Manzo, you can raise your hand. Same thing, Ms. Flowers, okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Can you just add to that? Just add to it that the reimbursement comes the year.
Right. Yep. So the reimbursement comes the year after. So we have our expenses that we incur in FY21, and then those get reimbursed in FY22. So we're always kind of a year behind in our reimbursement. I should also mention too, this is just an example that we give, but the rate of reimbursement, I put at 70%. That's a variable rate. So it usually comes in somewhere around 68, 70. Fully funded would be 75. So we have to make projections just based on the information that we have. So I did this example on 70%, but there are times that the reimbursement is lower or higher, depending on the funding that's available.
Mr. Manzo, you had a question?
I got two quick questions for you, Bethany.
Sure.
So in the previous slide, the one that was entitled Out-of-District Enrollment has decreased. So we distinguish between private and public placements.
Yes.
And so would a public placement be like the North Shore Consortium or other collaboratives?
That's correct. Yep. Public placements are collaborative placements.
And so remind me, what other collaboratives are we a part of besides the consortium?
So the consortium is the one that we are a member district of. We also do have some students who attend SEAM Collaborative and CREST Collaborative. So we're not member districts of those collaboratives, but we do send students there.
And then while the slide is up here, my other question was, you said that the level of reimbursement has been mostly steady
Yep.
the last several years. Is that because the bulk of these reimbursement payments are coming from that yellow section, right? The private, the students in private placements?
That's correct. Yep. So there are some, we do get some reimbursement from the public, the green section of that graph, but the majority that we get is from the higher cost placements, private day placements that are higher cost, or residential placements.
Right.
Yep.
And those numbers have stayed relatively the same at least the last 4 years.
Correct. Yep.
Right, where you've seen a drastic decrease in the number of students in the public placements.
Yes. Yeah. The students who would have maybe been placed in public programs, we've been able to keep within our own programs because we've been able to build capacity within district.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now I need to catch up to where we were. How about this page?
There we go. Yep, that's it. So in terms of changes within our department, we've had continued growth of our severe needs program. So right now, currently, we have 4 classrooms at the Cove Elementary School. We have 2 classrooms at the North Beverly Elementary School. We have 2 classrooms at the middle school, and we have 2 classrooms at the high school. And so we're really closely monitoring this enrollment. There are strict regulations around class size within our severe needs programs. And so we're continuing to monitor that enrollment, to see if we're going to need to make some changes in terms of the classrooms that we have. We continue to have some revenue coming in through our tuitioned in students and through some contracted services with our teacher of the deaf. And then we continue to build on our inclusive services. So we're continuing to expand and strengthen our co-teaching model. We've done a lot of work around our related services to provide more inclusive models of service delivery. And our newest development in terms of inclusion models is at our preschool level, where we're looking to provide more inclusive opportunities for our youngest learners. Additionally, we have 2 new federal grants that we're receiving in our department. These are grants that were previously available, and then they were not funded for several years, and now they are back. So we've got the 274 grant, which is to support districts in improving high-quality programs to improve outcomes for students with disabilities, and also this year to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. And that amount is $31,346. And then we also have the 298, which is a grant that is to support early childhood special education activities for students ages 3 to 5 with disabilities. And that was $3,964. So we were excited to have those funding opportunities.
And they'll be voting on those later on this evening
Fantastic.
when we talk
Thanks.
about grants.
In terms of the impact of COVID-19, this year we've been prioritizing instruction for our students with significant and complex needs, as well as our preschool age students, and this is aligned with our DESE guidance around prioritization of instruction. We also have other groups that we've prioritized instruction for too, but during our periods of remote instruction, these students were able to continue with in-person instruction. Our department was, the beginning of this year, had to write individualized service plans for all of our students in special education. And these service plans are in addition to the IEP, and they really outline how services are provided differently because of the pandemic. And so it was quite a big undertaking for our department, and everybody did a fantastic job with writing these additional plans. So some of the things we had to take into account are reducing the mixing of cohorts, changes in whether we're providing services in class or out of class. So depending on the circumstance, there were some times where it was safer for students to keep them in the classroom and provide services in class. And sometimes the opposite was true. If the numbers were higher, it was safer to pull students out. So some of those changes could happen regardless of the way that the IUP was written through the individualized services plan. And then also, if students were receiving instruction remotely or through use of technology, that was also outlined in their individualized services plan. All of our meetings are being held virtually, which has been going very well. And I think many parents have asked if they will continue next year to continue with the virtual meetings. So that's been really great for our department. And then the other consideration is around some need for compensatory services. And just to clarify around this, this is not because IEPs were not implemented or because services weren't provided. This is really specifically related to the impacts of COVID-19, especially in the spring of 2020, when we had some students, due to the nature of their disability, who just plain and simply could not access remote instruction, despite the best efforts. And so there are some circumstances where compensatory services do need to be provided. And then last but not least, I want to give an update on our tiered focus monitoring. So as a review, districts are reviewed through a 6-year review cycle, which was previously known as the coordinated program review. The difference in the tiered focus monitoring is that it allows for differentiated monitoring based on a district's level of need. And so districts are put into one of 4 tiers. They're either placed in self-directed improvement, directed improvement, corrective action, or cross-unit support and corrective action. So the goal is to be in tier 1 or tier 2. Those are considered low or no risk. And so we completed our self-assessment in FY20. And the result of this self-assessment was that we were placed in tier 2, which is a low risk tier. And so that was fantastic news, and that will impact our on-site review, which will take place in March. So in March, they will come and they will review some of our student records. They will do some surveys of parents. They will interview some staff. They will interview some of our CPAC members, and then they may or may not do observations of classrooms and other facilities. Typically, under normal circumstances, they do observations, but because of COVID restrictions, that may or may not happen. They may do more virtual. So that's going to be happening at the end of March, and we're looking forward to that process. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, I'm looking around the room. Yes, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you for all that. I was just wondering, are you forecasting a need for any additional services or educators this either over the summer or in the fall for catching up, maybe more paras or anything like that?
Yeah. So it's we're working on those forecasting now. It's a little bit hard because it's only January, and so we're still having a lot of placement decisions that are being made, and things are still kind of in flux with that. I'm concerned about the needs within our severe needs program. I think it's possible that there may be some additional staffing requirements, but we need to see how those numbers shake out before we know for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, on the remote end, Mr. Manzo or Ms. Flowers, do you have any questions? Ms. Coelho? All right, I have one question for you, Ms. Molansky.
Sure.
Relative to the compensatory, I
Compensatory.
have a tough time with that word. When we need to compensate people.
Yes.
What is, are we going to see that in somewhere as a line item? Do we have money already in the budget for that? How is that impacting can we pay for those fees out of some of our COVID funds that we've gotten?
So the answer is that there's not going to be like a specific kind of line item. Some of the services that we're talking about can be covered through some of our grants and some of our contracted services. Most honestly can be absorbed through our, through our service providers in our schools, because a lot of times we're talking about some just minor services. And then there are some situations that for students with more severe needs that may be provided through contracted services. So.
Okay, so it's not like someone's getting a payment, it's that
No.
we quote unquote owe them some number of services.
Right.
And so we can maybe make up. So if you were supposed to go to physical therapy twice a week and you missed 10 visits, maybe over the next 10 weeks, we send you 3 times a week instead of 2.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, none of this was because of services not being offered or provided. It was either, because of a student's inability to access the services, or in some cases, parents opted not to participate in services for whatever family situations were going on. So that could be exactly right. If a student missed out on therapy for a certain period of time, we may be providing additional services through their regular school services.
Okay, fantastic. One
Yeah.
last go around the room. If anybody has any questions, and online, anybody have any questions for Ms. Spolansky? Okay, so are you staying for the rest of our meeting, or are you free to go?
I think I will adjourn.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, you'll be home for the rest of the inauguration.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is Jean wants to see the administration update. Hold, please. Yep. Here it comes. And we make that full screen. Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you,
the
Ms. Spolansky.
Finance and Facilities meeting for the January 20th, the administration updates is going to be on the FY22 budget calendar, school choice and circuit breaker revenue updates, and our FY21 financial reports. I'm going to talk the slides, and then after I'm all done, we'll bring up just the calendar, so I'm not asking you to jump out and then back and forth. So the first thing is I want to discuss is FY22 budget timeline calendar. So in the charter, we have to bring the budget to the Finance and Facilities, and then, as you know, in the previous years, is then most of our committee of the whole meetings. After that, we have discussions on the upcoming budget. So our timeline is January through April. The budget discussion meetings are with the administration and the school committee. The superintendent has been meeting with the principals this current week with myself, and she has upcoming meetings with the school committee members. May 12th, 2021 is our scheduled public hearing on our FY22 budget proposal. And June is when we will be meeting with the city council on our discussions for our school budget. The state budget timeline, I like to say normally, is that the governor's proposed budget comes out in January. The Massachusetts House Ways and Means comes out in April. The Senate comes out in May, and the state's budget is usually finalized in June. So we're going to be staying with that, and I'll talk a little bit about the budget, our calendar after. There was 2 items that I wanted to bring up to the committee's attention. The FY21 school choice revenue changes. I'm delighted to say both of them up on the positive side. So the school choice revenue was estimated based on the FY20 final number, which was $693,035, with the district receiving 123.8 receiving students. So it's not that we get a 0.8 of a student, it's how many months they attend. The December 2020 report from the Massachusetts Department of Education is reporting that we are having 128 receiving students, so the number has gone up, and the increase in school choice revenue of $12,641 to the preliminary amount, so now it's $705,676. We get this amount on a monthly basis. And what I would like to report, Ms. Flowers would like to hear is that the school choice sending for FY20 was finalized at 71.1 sending students. This is the estimate at a cost of $438,511. And the December report indicates that we have reduced students going out to 60, and our cost would be dropped down to $427,448. So that is absorbed on the city's accounts.
You're getting a big thumbs up from Ms. Flowers.
There you go. I was pleased to see it also. The FY21 circuit breaker revenue changes, we estimated at $1,977,796 for, excuse me, FY21 fiscal year at 70% is what they were estimating. The December 11, 2020 report from DESE is estimating the revenue increase of an additional $132,864 for a total of $2,110,660 for the fiscal year, which is coming in at approximately 75% reimbursement. So Ms. Splansky just talked about it can come in anywhere from 68 on the average 68 to 75. It's supposed to be funded at 75%, but not many years does it actually come in that, and they are estimating it's going to be at 75%. And then I will be reviewing the revenues, the expenses. We have some grants to accept that Ms. Splansky just spoke about, and we have some gifts to schools. So the budget calendar would be the first thing, budget development process. Yes, that's it. So last year, Dr. Schrochek and myself developed a budget process that this is a live document that can change, where we can add additional meetings if we need to, but pretty much is the FY22 budget calendar was developed in December. We're bringing forward the calendar and discussions, timeline discussions today here, and then we are anticipating that the governor's proposed state budget would be released this month. I'm not sure this year if it's going to happen actually in January or if it's going to be pushed into February. We have not heard. And then we're going to be having a meeting on January 27th, the Committee of the Whole, to start our budget discussions. Superintendent is meeting with most of the school committee members prior to that date. So that will be really our kickoff of when we start talking about goals and priorities. In February, we have a Committee of the Whole scheduled for February 24th, March 24th, and April 28th, where all of those times we will be having budget discussions and, pretty much building our budget. In May, we will need to advertise in the newspaper for our public hearing in the local newspaper. The superintendent's annual budget recommendations will be released to the public on the 10th. The 12th will be the public hearing. And then right now I have it scheduled that the Committee of the Whole meeting on the 26th we'll have our final budget discussions and the school committee vote. That's subject to change if the mayor is looking for us to have a meeting earlier. We may have to move that up, but that's pretty much what our timeline has been in the past, is we would not vote on the same night as our public hearing. And I have it just scheduled on the next Committee of the Whole. Excuse me. And then in June, we will be having our budget discussions with the City Council. The state will finalize it, and then we will finalize our FY22 budget, and then the new fiscal year will roll over. How we do this is we have to work on the charter, this calendar. So in the past, I have shown like how we got to these dates, but I felt that was, what really people need to know is just what are the dates. But there's a formula that we have to start with is when the annual organization of the city government starts, which was January 4th, and you have to go out to how many days, 170 days is the last date the city council can actually submit, has the deadline to submit it, which is June 23rd. And then you have to 20 days prior, have to have a public hearing, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work that goes into getting to those dates, but we will be within the charter, and this is our timeline. And then if we find that we have more discussions, we need more committee of the wholes, the superintendent would ask to add additional meetings.
All right, anybody have any questions for Ms. Sherburne on our calendar for our budget process? Okay, next item,
Next item I have is the revenues.
revenue report. Coming at you.
So it's, what you're looking at here is the city, our revenue report for our appropriation. As you'll see on the top line, it says city appropriations. We had the $62,417,942. And we received the additional appropriation from the city council, thank you very much, of $867,863. Therefore, our new revised budget is $63,285,805. We received these quarterly increments from the city, puts it in. As of Munis, they hadn't done the January one, so I only see 1 quarter coming in. So, but we know we will get those funds. I'm not worried about that. School choice, and that's where you'll see that I have increased in the third column, 119,119. So we have as a budget offset of 586,557, and we'll be receiving in 705,676. And we've received that we receive on that we received half of that because we're halfway through the year. We received that monthly. The circuit breaker revenue, we budgeted $2,003,956, and last month I reported that we were going to have to use $6,160 from the carryover, but as I just reported 2 minutes ago, there's actually an increase, so we're actually receiving $106,704 for that. We received this quarterly, and any funds that we don't use this year can be carried over into the next year with the circuit breaker revolving. The next thing I have is the special education tuition. Bethany talked about some students that are tuitioned in, and she has some contracted services that we deliver with our staff, and they're anticipating $163,700 for that. And we cover for some teaching positions and additional supports that we've needed to put into the classrooms, like paraprofessionals, that, because the classes are taking in other students. And we've received $30,906 of that. And I did check with the special education department recently to make sure that that number is still staying the same, with COVID, are the students still participating, whether it's remote or in person. And it is. The next thing we have is the non-resident tuition, which is also known as SEVIS, and that is for the education program in the high school. The students only come for 1 year, and we had anticipated $88,000, and that funding goes towards our teaching 6 additional classes. And we do still have the expenditures, but we do not have the students, so therefore I'm going to be coming in this year, so I am going to be using the what's in the revolving account for that. We had a budget discussion this week with the principal, Betty Taylor, and she did say that education is looking to have students start coming in maybe next year, so we are out there, we are receiving them if they are interested in coming. Miscellaneous revenues, we didn't have any. And the education fund, we've received $275 this year, and that is where taxpayers can put additional money in with their taxes that would go just directly to the education. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the school department reimbursements, and then I can go into the fees.
I'm looking for hands online. Nope,
Nope.
none.
The next thing I have is the school department fees. So we have transportation fee. So as you will see here, this month I am showing that we're going to be, we allocated that we'd have a budget offset of $218,600. And based on what the transportation department is transporting students that are actually fee-based is only going to be $19,000. So we're going to be using $199,600 of our appropriated. So you'll see that I did not put it in the second column, meaning that I'm going to take it from the revolving account, but rather we're going to absorb it in the budget that we currently have, and that covers bus driver salaries. If I find at near the end of the year I do not have enough funds in other line items to cover that cost, I would go to the revolving account, but at this time I do not think I need to. The building rental fees, primarily the YMCA is where we get the funding from. Our budget offset is $320,000. I am planning on using $200,000 of the revolving account carryover, and we're planning on receiving $120,000 from, and primarily it is the YMCA building rental for the after-school or after-school program. The preschool revolving, we budget $45,881. That goes towards a teacher salary. And based on the students that are attending our program, we're anticipating that we're going to be receiving an additional $14,619, which would be $60,500. And we've been collecting that as we go. Those payments are due monthly. The kindergarten revolving, as you know, that we had a budget, we have a budget offset of $200,000, and we had that money in the revolving account to cover it. We are not anticipating any fees this year since we are free full-day kindergarten starting this year. The user fees for the athletics, we have budgeted $209,748 for coaches' salaries and other athletic expenses. And this year they have many different calendars, seasons. So I'm hoping to meet with Mr. Keefe so that we can bring him forward maybe at the next meeting to talk about, what is going on and how it is. Right now, I have seen that the first seasons that we had more expenses than income. So that is something that I am watching to make sure I don't have any surprises at the end of the school year. And then the user fees for the elementary and strings, that was offset teacher salaries. And again, I'm going to be absorbing that in the budget this year. That's all I have to say about revenues. Any questions?
I'm looking online, I'm looking in the room. What's next?
Ms. Robinson
Oh,
has
Ms.
just-
Robinson, I'm sorry.
What is the summer academy that had?
Summer Academy is something that we had previously. I've never taken it off because it might be something that it can build upon again at some point, so we do have it there. But it was summer programs where teachers would do enrichment courses,
Right,
et cetera,
yeah.
et cetera. And students would pay a little fee towards it, and this would be the revolving account.
Okay.
So being a school district, we can only set up revolving accounts with specific things. So I couldn't just set up a revolving account for anything I want. It has to fit. So that is one of the areas that if we had classes.
Thanks.
But we haven't run any in, I think, probably like 5 years. Is it longer? I know they had it when I first came here 10 years ago. Next thing I have is
Yeah, what do we think that's called?
that's called the year-to-date budget report, expenditure report. It's probably the biggest file for size.
I am not seeing that in my downloads. Let me go back to email, I apologize.
That's okay. I can talk about the other things. We can leave that for last, since that one doesn't need a vote and the other two do.
And that should have come in the very first packet, right?
Yeah, right. It's with the blue topping. Yeah, that one right there.
F&F Jan. Do I have that? F&F and Jan. No, stop it. Stop it. All right, we'll download it. Sorry. Technical difficulties.
So the next report I have is the year-to-date budget report. And this is our expenditure report. So I was hoping that I was going to have some transfers done at the end of, down the agenda, but I have not been able to do those for this month. So I will be bringing forward those next month. So this here will show you the budget as it stands as of today. We have been negotiating contracts with our AFSCME and our BTA, and we have had some ratifications on a few of those, and I think the rest will probably be coming hopefully at the end of the week. So therefore, I can start bringing probably one very large transfer next month to show that. This here will tell you, the first column is what our appropriation is. The second column is going to show you any transfers that have been done and/or any purchase orders that were carried over from the previous year. And the third column is our revised budget. The next column is what we've spent year to date. Then we have any encumbrances we have that money is already earmarked for something. In the final column, with figures, dollar figures would be the available budget. And the final column tells you what the percentage of the budget has been used. At this time, if anybody has any specific questions, the areas that I always look at and bring to your attention is on page 36 is the SP 860 area. That's one of our largest areas, expenditure areas. That is the special education tuition out. And that right now, it does look pretty good right now. We do have some money available in the collaborative line and in the private residential. But I like to warn people that some days we can look at this and the next day we look at it and it's gone. As Bethany talked about earlier, we can have a residential placement or a placement that's like $200,000, and that would be eaten up some of that money significantly. If there's any other particular areas people would like to look at, one of the areas that last month that I talked about was the unemployment, and we did fix part of that. And I'm trying to figure out what account number that was under. It's on page 33. It's OT 800 62812. And we did transfer in. We did have a little bit of a carryover, and when we passed the additional appropriation of 867, about 135,000, I believe, was the total amount, went into unemployment. So this shows us that we have 145,000 for the remainder of the year, which we are just paying. I think we have August. We're into August right now, so we still have to pay August through. But I'm looking at those before we make any payments to make sure that we deduct anything that may be a fraudulent claim. The unemployment office is not going to charge us for being delayed, which is the first time. They always had fees on top if you didn't pay timely, but they don't want us to be putting through, claims and then trying to get the money back. So we're looking at the fraudulent claims.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm looking around the room and I'm looking online. Does anybody have any questions about the expenditure report? Okay, I see
Nope.
none. Miss Jean?
All right. Next item I have is the grants or the gifts to schools, your choice.
Gifts to school, because it's first in the
That's fine.
alphabetically. Oh, boy. Okay, let me try to make this a little bigger.
So we'll be looking for a motion to approve $4,618 in accepting the gifts to schools. We have, under the high school, there is two amounts that we received from the Cummings Center Staff Giving. It was actually brought to my attention, somebody thought that I may have had a duplication, and it actually is, yes, we have a duplicate. We have two people that work in the Cummings Center that earmarked their gift that they're organization was going to go to the Beverly Strings Orchestra. And then we did have, another donation for a vaping survey at the high school. And then under Hannah, the Cummings Center staff giving was $1,000 for general use in the school. It would be at the principal's direction. And the final thing is the food service department received a $500 gift for lunch for the staff that has been handing out the meals. So Christina will get that in and then make sure that all the staff are able to participate in that.
All right, so this is one of my favorite parts of this meeting. I would love to entertain a motion to accept these gifts to schools. Ms. Coelho made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Robinson seconded that. Do we have any comments, questions, discussion? Besides my usual, who would say no to free money? Okay, we're gonna do a roll call vote. Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Manzo,
Yes.
thank you. Myself, yes, that passes 4-0.
The next thing I have is the FY21 grants.
Hold, please. Oh, I got an Excel for this one, Jean.
Oh, my. A live document.
Don't sound,
Oh, my
don't
goodness.
sound surprised. It's your document. You shouldn't be surprised.
I know.
Okay.
So these two grants are the two grants that Ms. Splansky was just discussing earlier this evening. It's grant number 274 for $31,346, and those are going to be used for supplies and contracted services for pre-K through 12. And grant number 298, both of these are Department of Education grants. And that second one is for $3,964, and that's going to be used for technology for preschool grades, ages 3 to 5. So therefore, I'm looking for a motion to approve the grants, accept these grants in the amount of $35,310.
We can do them together.
Yes.
I would love to entertain a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Second?
Second.
Sure. Either one of our other members, Jenna, whatever you want to write down, whichever one's easier to type. Do we have any questions or comments or discussion? I'm glad you find that entertaining, Ms. Flowers. Okay, here comes our vote. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Fantastic. Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Myself, yes. That passes 4-0.
And I do not have any transfers to bring forward.
Okay. I lost my window with my hold place. We're having technical difficulties. Here's our agenda. No transfers, so we did our grants and our gifts to schools. That brings us to the end of our agenda.
Yes, it does.
This is an all-time fastest ever
I
meeting.
know.
You just did that to make me happy,
I
Jean.
did. Our next meeting is in February. I don't know the date off the top of my head.
We can go find that.
But I'm planning on asking Mr. Keefe to come and give us an athletics update.
All right, we'll get that date. So, Mr. Keefe, next meeting. Would we like to submit questions ahead of time for Mr. Keefe?
Yes, if there's
That-
any questions or what you would like him to be providing, would be great if we could get that. I'd appreciate it if you could send an email to Mr. Keefe and CC me. That way it's not getting stuck in my mailbox and not to get to him. So that way if you send him directly, is that okay with Superintendent that they send him directly? Thank you.
All right, so if you guys have any sports questions, this would be where we want to maybe talk about the different seasons and the fact that we maybe, if he has any idea whether there's any expected changes with our multi-sport athletes, given that some of the sports have been moved, right? So that came up in a previous meeting.
Yep, I think any questions that you have, send them along, and we will be ready to kind of try to see if we have answers. Whether we have answers or not, I'm not sure. I think, things are evolving at a rapid pace all the time as it comes to these things, so but certainly send the questions along, and that would be.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else before I entertain a motion to adjourn? I'm looking for hands on my remote participants.
Looks like
Anybody in
they're
the
all set.
room? All right, who wants to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Manzo, thank you for making that motion. Ms. Coelho, did I hear you say second? Fantastic, thank you. Here we go, Mr. Manzo, voting.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Myself, yes, that passes 4-0. Again, I thank everybody. Thank you, Mr. Manzo and Ms. Flowers, for sharing your time with us this evening. Thank you, fellow members, and we'll see you. Oh, I put up on my screen, our next meeting is Wednesday, February 24th, and it's a little earlier. It's a stacked meeting that night, so it'll be at 6:30, 6:30 start, and then we have another meeting after it. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, BevCam.